Oh, hello again. I am so happy that I ran into you. The last time we met, I told you about the time that Jesus told Peter to go fishing for a coin to pay the temple tax. And since then, I've been thinking about all the stories when Jesus taught me some really good lessons in some really strange ways. Do you have a minute for me to tell you another story? Oh, great. Now, you should know, Jesus was the most patient guy I have ever known, except when he was hungry. I think the term that you use nowadays is hangry, and oh man, Jesus could be that. Why do you think there's so many scriptures about us eating, huh? That was all Jesus. I know he tried to pass it off as being a sacred time when you could really get to know someone. And it is, but it was also just that Jesus really liked food. He wasn't picky about what it was. A piece of bread and some wine was fine with him. But he just wasn't the Jesus that we all know and love when he was hungry. One day, near the end of his ministry, we were on our way into Jerusalem from Bethany, where we were staying with friends. The day before had been so exciting, with the crowd crying Hosanna and shouting out his name as we walked into the city, and I think we were all still on a bit of a high. After spending the day in the temple, we had gone back to Bethany for the night, and we were on our way into the temple again, and we were all keen about the trip. Now remember, it's not like this is a long walk. We'd be on the road for less than an hour and could stop in the market before heading to the temple if we needed to. Oh, and Martha had just fed us a fantastic breakfast back at the house before we left. But Jesus decided he wanted figs. And if I'm being honest, the way he described the ripe, juicy fruit had us all agreeing that this would make a wonderful snack. So when we saw a fig tree in the distance, we hurried towards it. Except what we had all forgotten in our excitement was that it was a bit too early for figs. The leaves were in full bloom, but it would be another month or more before the fruit was ready to be picked. All of our faces fell in disappointment, but Jesus got hangry, and he spat out, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." We all chuckled at the extreme response to a tree, but then Judas brought out some of the dried figs that he had in his bag, and all seemed to be right in the world again. When we got to the temple, I realized that Jesus was still in a bad mood, because he started grumbling about the money changers and the animal sellers, saying that they were turning his father's house into a den of thieves. And then he started flipping over tables and driving people out of the temple. I remember looking over at Peter to see if this was part of some bigger plan, but he looked just as confused as I was. These folks were a fixture at the temple, and they provided a good service. Since Roman coin could not be used, and it was really hard to get a sacrificial animal all the way to Jerusalem unblemished on a long journey, they helped to make sure that the service of the temple could continue. Sure, they sometimes exaggerated their prices, but that was just part of life. And to top it off, we had seen them yesterday when we were there, and Jesus had been happy to have conversations with them. I was definitely confused. After a couple of minutes of watching, we heard someone shout that the Romans were coming, and the rest of the disciples and I sprang into action. We had to get Jesus out of there for his own safety and the safety of everyone else who was gathered. The Roman government took a dim view of Jewish riots at any time, but during Passover week, there was an even thicker tension in the air, and it wouldn't take much for them to start crucifying people. Somehow we managed to grab Jesus and fight our way through the crowd before the soldiers arrived, and quickly headed for the market where we could get something to eat, and Jesus sat and taught the crowds for the rest of the day. When night fell, we returned to Bethany with quite the story to share around the supper table. Bright and early the next morning, we set out for Jerusalem again. And as we came to the fig tree from the day before, Peter noticed there was something different. What had been a healthy, vibrant tree was now withered and dry. When he brought it to Jesus' attention, Jesus used the opportunity to teach us about prayer, faith, and forgiveness. I'll never forget how he said that if we had true faith in God and prayed in that faith, we could bring about things that seem impossible. That's not to say that God is like your Santa Claus, giving everything our hearts desire, but that through persistent prayer, and often action to go with that prayer, we can move mountains. But Jesus also taught me more than just through his words that day. He taught me about anger and patience. He taught me that sometimes anger is completely justified. He was right that the money changers and animal sellers were engaging in some questionable practices. But that also, sometimes it isn't. Getting mad at a tree for not having fruit when it's not the right season just doesn't make sense. He taught me that uncontrolled anger can be harmful. If words spoken in anger to that tree could make it wither and die, what might they do when directed to another person? He taught me that our actions have consequences. It was partially because of this episode in the temple that the authorities sought so hard to find a way to silence him. Yes, they were already doing so, and the outcome might have been the same regardless, but they were certainly spurred on by Jesus' actions that day. One of the greatest things about Jesus that I didn't truly understand when I journeyed with him around the countryside, and that I'm not really sure that I fully understand even now, is that he was both human and divine. Because of that, he gives us something to strive towards in faith, but he also understands when we don't always do as we should. In those moments with the fig tree and in the temple, Jesus was very human, expressing frustration and anger that had probably been building up inside him for the last 3 years of his ministry. And in his humanity, he taught me more about patience, faith, and violence of word and action than I had learned in all my time listening to him preach. So I want to say thank you for allowing me to share this story with you today. And I hope it gives you something to think about as you go into your week. Now, if you'll excuse me, it is the season for figs now, and I think I'm going to go pick some and remember my good friend Jesus and all the great lessons he taught me in the time I knew him. Goodbye.